Walls have long been more than mere structural elements. They are canvases that narrate stories, reflecting desires for nature, spirituality, or the pursuit of tranquility and stimulation. We have this long-term human desire to decorate the walls around us, right? This is almost like fundamental to the human condition, that we will smear blood and mud on the cave walls from hundreds of thousands of years ago. The Egyptians will spare no expense in terms of burying their dead. And pre-modern times, this was luxury. Luxury was the finest materials, the finest textiles, paintings, frescoes. Right. I live in the Netherlands, so just last week I went and checked out this castle. This was some baron's, fabulous, rich castle. Every single room was just filled with story and allegory, whether it's through the patterns, the symbols, the faux skylight frescoes up above, the beautiful stained glass, the tapestries everywhere, the sculptures. I mean, pre-modernism, we were surrounding ourselves in story and narrative and allegory, and it just created very rich lives until we hit the Industrial Revolution. And you can have any color you want as long as it's black. We stripped everything down. We modernized it. Le Corbusier stripped everything away. I'm pretty sure he said probably in French, you can have any color you want as long as it's concrete, right? Or white maybe. And we lost something here, right? The rest of us mere mortals just were left with plasterboard, sheetrock, as us gringos call it. And luxury is you can put an 80-inch screen on, or if it's real luxury, you put a bigger sheetrock box with a 100-inch screen on it. And where is all the richness? Where's the, where does this define luxury? I mean, we know this world. This is polyform closet systems and Val Cucina kitchens and fabulous furniture. And we fill these sheetrock boxes with lots and lots of stuff. It's a very material-driven modernism nowadays. But I steal this image from Pink Floyd because it doesn't matter how rich you are. In fact, the richer you are, the more you learn this lesson is that time is the most precious commodity. So what I feel like as designers, architects, interior designers, theater, the thing that we could offer the best value to these clients is, we're not just designing their life, their lifestyles in terms of their material surroundings. We're designing their life in terms of moments of the time, of using every single moment of their time to make it precious, to make it special for them. So how do we do this? How do we bridge the gap between where we are in the technology and what we can do for the client? So the first big leap we have to make is stop thinking of these things as TVs and start thinking of these things as architectural surfaces. These are now becoming digital portals. They're becoming the key material to making immersive digital experiences. And once we make that transition, here's 4 ideas that we can explore: cycles of time, layers of reality, the extension of space, and digital art canvases. They'll give us some new design language that we can embrace. Let's first talk about this transition. This is the way the AV industry continues to think of it. We have a screen in a box. Now, this is a square screen in a very nice mahogany box, but I mean, it's still the same thing. It's still just a screen, and it's treated the same way that it's a media content box. You watch your football, you watch your Netflix, it's still the same thing. You watch your Leave It to Beaver. It hasn't changed. But the technology has certainly changed, as we just shared with you. Now this is more like the size of a porcelain tile. So if it's a porcelain tile, it really becomes an architectural surface. And when we do an interior design presentation, we do material swatches, you do samples, paint chips, you can do mood board images. Well, I mean, now we can literally show digital media content as part of that material board. How would we present this to clients? And the results are that it's not just a little media box. It can be the entire architectural wall. And it can be this fabulous surface in any proportion, any size, any scale you want. You could immerse yourself with the ceilings, the walls completely surrounding us. Now, here's the other thing that's really important, as I was alluding to this earlier, is that the quality of this technology has changed. You have to remember, the NASDAQ sign was really the first big splashy architectural use of LED lighting that is 25 years old at this point. And then the scale of all the spectacle LED lighting, whether it's Las Vegas and signs and architectural building lighting in the exterior, the Sphere, right, U2, the entire dome, massive size, they pushed LEDs to be the architectural scale of anything you could dream of. But Hollywood now, in the past 3 to 4 years has pushed the quality to these unbelievable levels where it's approaching reality. So this is Industrial Light and Magic's The Volume. This is shooting Disney's The Mandalorian. And if instead of having a green screen like they traditionally would, they have an entire LED wall and the entire ceiling is LED. And then they use camera tracking and use live rendering so that everywhere that camera is looking through, they get a perfect backdrop. So they no longer need post effects. They can get most of the shot in camera. They can get 100% of the shot in camera on many of these scenes, which is why they've had the cinematic quality brought to television programs in mass. So this though is unforgiving in quality, and the scale of this bringing reality, it's sort of like the old, Star Trek teleportation. You can be anywhere you want at any time. And behind the scenes, right, I was saying, we do this Helios processing. You have all these technical specs. It's an alphabet soup of numbers and letters and standards. It's way too hard to understand. The only thing you have to take away from that is that you see screens like this, and it gets better every single day, week, month. The technology only gets better. So we're at this precipice now that when you're standing in front of a wall like this and you have the right content and the right display and the right processing, it is very hard to tell, am I looking at a real window? Am I looking at reality or not? So the tech, total freedom, anything you want. The reality, very high. So what's missing? To me, it's the design of experience. That's the bridge between the theater world and the architecture world that we can do. So let's just think for a moment, really, what does it mean to design experience? To situate being in time and space, or another slight variation, to build a situated, structured experience across time. You can see why I say this is more aligned with what the theater guys do than what us architects do, right, in terms of thinking through. And it's a shame that we as designers don't use this more, because space and time is fundamentally how human brains record memories. I dare you to think of a time in your past that does not fundamentally have a space associated with it. So if we want to create the rich moments, if we want to start to design our clients' lives in terms of the time and the value of time, we really have to think of space and time together. So this leads me to my first sort of creative hook that we can start to talk about, cycles of time. And this is sort of low-hanging fruit, that when you have giant walls like this and it's part of a person's key moments of life, it should just reflect the right time, right? Daily, morning, afternoon, night. Do you want to have your fine red wine overlooking Paris, the city of light? Do you want to have seasonal effects, holidays, birthday parties, special events, sports teams? This is not rocket science. Now, even just 2 years ago, the story would immediately, yeah, but content's really expensive. Yeah, but content's not expensive anymore, right? You can do AI, and let's say you want to have winter, it's Christmas, and it's my kid's birthday, and I want that wall to have the perfect content. Just go into Midjourney, type it, you get exactly those images, because these 9 images are all AI generated. They're not even real photos. So the content story is going away. This entire image, in fact, most of the images I'm showing you are simply AI renderings. Right? They're not even computer renderings. But in terms of like, what season is this? Well, it's obviously springtime, it's cherry blossoms. What time of day is this? This would look very incongruous if this was showing a bright sunny morning somewhere and you're actually at night. And if you're in your Aspen ski chalet and you're coming in from the cold and you want your hot cocoa and your romantic moment, it probably wouldn't be very good to have a Tahitian beach on the screen, right? Now, let's say it's mid-March, you're living in London or the Netherlands somewhere, and it's been 6 straight months of rain. Probably you'd like the Tahitian beach. Again, how do you design that? How do you have such a close relationship? And the technology story behind the scenes is really this. The AV world in architecture since the 80s has kind of taken the preset scenes from theater, right, where you have a scene, all the values are set, record it. Next scene, all the values, record it. And we need to transition that into this sort of linear concept. We need to talk and think in cycles of time, not this. Because what happens now with all these Crestrons, Lutron systems, and trust me, I spec dozens of them, just as guilty as that, you kind of record a couple scenes, you hope it's the right one, the poor client comes in, hits these buttons randomly, they're like, what is this? I don't know. Well, okay, we'll just use this for dinner. I don't know what it's supposed to be. So it's not even linear, it's just scrambled scene design. And I think about how would we start to document this? How do you diagram this? How do you present this to clients? And really we're thinking of cycles of time, different scales, different representatives, representations. You want to show, like, in the morning, sir, you're going to do your yoga and we're going to have this scene, and you're going to have your wine at night in this scene, and how's it going to look? And you also have the different scales of time, not just cycles of time, seasons, sports. I mean, if you're designing for a pro footballer, game day is massive for them. The lead up to game day is massive for them. The home doesn't reflect it, right? How could we miss that opportunity? So like I said, it's winter, it's Christmas, it's a birthday party, or it's a holiday party. What should the architecture be doing? What should it represent? And from an implementation point of view, this is very low-hanging fruit. You could go to any AV integrator, I'm sure. You could put a package together. You could put a signage player in, an advertising signage player that just has a scheduled range of JPEGs per calendar, right? Or you can do all sorts of sophisticated systems. You can imagine, and very quickly in the future, we have AI systems built into these generative systems that are clock-based, time-based, that can create whatever you want on a live basis. The second concept is layering content. Now, I'm sure in a lot of out-of-home advertising, what is it here in London? Piccadilly Circus, right? Has the big LED walls. You've probably seen the forced perspective, right? Trompe l'oeil. This has nothing to do with technology. And unfortunately, you're seeing a lot of these LED screen companies calling it naked eye 3D and all that stuff. It's nothing. It's just a flat image. It's no different than a portraiture from 1874. You all know how to put a point on a cocktail napkin and draw one single point perspective. It's the same thing, but when used in digital technologies, it's very, very powerful. Like, I was just in Denver Airport, and Rafik Anadol had an early art installation from him, and it was just his, sort of lava lamp, beautiful effects, but in a TV screen. Nice, but okay. What Rafik did that made all the difference is his screen goes all the way out to here. He did that forced perspective edge condition, and suddenly it gives massive depth. It gives that perception of space and feeling, so that his lava lamp effects, AI, whatever he wants to call it, is bouncing around, and it's strikingly different. So let's think about luxury kitchens for a second. People will spare no expense on the kitchens. So to me, this is an obvious place that immersive digital experiences could be very powerful. So let's say you have brass rods. You can see holding up some real shelving here. You have a screen behind it. On the screen, you have your cherry blossoms. They're animated, they're swirling around. And then what you do is, behind the trees, you put some extra what looks like brass rods in, but those are virtual. Those aren't really there. You also play with the spacing, so you can't really see if it's correct forced perspective or not, right? You take it away from a single point, and you make it more forgiving across a wider range. Imagine how beautiful this would be to walk in the morning and you see this scene, right? And also the depth that you've created to this space. I mean, there's only 12 inches of depth there, but the perception is that you're looking into a world, right? It's very hard to diagram this. This is a sort of a designer's diagram. I don't think this works for any clients, but you can understand that what you'll have is projection mapping, or maybe in some future you have AR goggles, or you can look through phones on top of physical things. That could be sculpture, could be kitchen cabinets, shelving, could be retail displays. You have your sort of digital backdrop. You have your virtual content, and of course you have your forced perspective stepping back. So that's your layering of reality that you can have. A narrow subset of layering reality I'll call out separately as the third one, which is the extension of space, or the kind of digital window wall. So again, let's say you're in your fabulous Swiss chalet, but you actually don't have really great views or vistas for some reason, or maybe one room doesn't have it. So again, you could design something that is related contextually to the landscape or the cityscape that you're in, that feels right. So if you're in it and nobody's thinking, like, what am I looking at, that feels like that should be right. And if you detail it correctly, it feels like an extension of space. So let's say you go to a luxury hotel in Hawaii. You're walking in, you're seeing the fountains, the palm trees. You walk in, you see this. Your mind won't stop and say, that's incongruous, that doesn't work right. Now, if I'm in Midtown Manhattan on a gray day in winter and I walk in, I see that that's incongruous, it's fake, right? So there's this sort of extension of space that you could design and psychologically kind of think through. Another kitchen example, we don't have to talk about reality. You have customers that very well might want fantasy. So let's say you love Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or whatever, some sort of fantasy environment. You could create some entire magical fantasy world, and maybe There's some generative effects where, you know, a majestic elk comes through once every 10 days or something, or a little bunny or whatever is there. Like little Easter eggs, little treats, so that every day they don't know what they're going to get. Again, you're designing their life, you're designing their time, you're making their moments special so that it's different. For these virtual windows, as the scale proportionally fills the room, it makes you feel like you're closer. It makes you feel more immersive. So if you have proportionally a smaller window, you feel like it's a distant thing. As it gets bigger, it gets much more realistic inherently. Now, there are systems out there where you can do live rendering and you can track a person's face and you can actively adjust the perspective. That's how virtual production studios work. That's needed, but they also know exactly where the camera is. They know the camera lens, they know all that stuff. They can calculate that. You don't need that in architecture. There's just some old school techniques that you can do to make this feel hyper realistic without any of those technologies. So imagine that that's a huge digital wall. Imagine it's 16 inches, 2 feet back. These key walls actually stop short, and these walls extend past just slightly, maybe a foot above, behind. There's no window here. These are just sort of brass rods or something. No windows, they're just fake. But what that does is when you're standing here and a person moves around, they see the parallax of looking behind that. There's something there. You've instantly tricked the eye and the mind into thinking that that's a really deep space, that there is an actual physical space behind there because of that simple parallax effect. And it really doesn't add cost and complexity to the project. So the fourth area is using these screens as digital art canvases. This is the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. This is the Hall of Honors. I know this because a decade ago I spent a year in this building putting the lighting system in. Some of the most fabulous, precious artwork in the world. On any typical day, this will be so mobbed you can't even see the artwork. There's a problem with this though, in that I take my 2 boys who are 14 and 16, they could not care less. Because in their minds, this is not some vaunted, you know, bucket list piece of art that they have to see. That's just a 400-year-old frumpy milkmaid on a musty canvas and a still frame hanging on the wall. If you don't have that sort of art history, you don't have the pedigree of the artist, you don't care about the allegory that the artist was trying to tell, it's just frumpy old art, right? And there's something that to me is missing there. 2 kilometers away in Amsterdam, there's the Straat Museum, which is the street art museum, in this magnificent old shipbuilding yard. And you know, this is massive canvases. These are 12 to 16 feet, 8 to 10 feet tall canvases, and it's all, you know, spray can art. But it's phenomenal. Take my teenage boys there. They loved it. They want to go back. It's of their zeitgeist. It's of their time. It relates to them, and also it's of such a massive scale that when you're in there, you have a bodily relationship to the art. Right? You can see that the artist sprayed that line when you look really closely, just like somebody did their little pointillist, fussy stuff. And I love this image because at night when it's lit up, I was like, oh my God, this looks like digital screens, right? This just looks like it's digital signage through and through. There's a zeitgeist here that for the vast majority of the population that's not into snobby, finicky art history stuff, there's a world of content that you could enrich with them. And technically, these screens are a new form of digital canvas or a new form of art canvas that no other technology has. You have a vividness of the color, you have a depth of the blackness, you have the motion effects that you can add. The scale of these things you can set up to be any frame you want. You can create this very strong, like I said, the closer you are, the deeper you are into the artwork. You can create any proportion, right? You're not limited by 16:9, you're not limited by the size. You can make really long hallways. You have some sort of art that's progressive as you walk down. Columns. And again, back to the high-end kitchen. So imagine this is a beautiful biomimetic motion piece. And it's not pre-canned, it's algorithm generated. And it's live. And that algorithm is driven by time or some other factor. So when you go in the morning and you're bleary-eyed, you go to your fancy cappuccino machine, you get this, and you're staring at your art, every single day will be different, or richer, or variation, right? Maybe you have the color palette changed to represent the seasons, or maybe you have the speed of the motion changed to represent the stock market that day, or the weather report. You know, my wall is showing me what the weather is going to be like because it's reflecting the wind speed outside. And it's called ambient communications. And a digital canvas gives you the fundamentals of motion graphics, motion design. You know, this is a whole new world of art that's just not explored, and traditional art people they don't get it. They don't know how to talk about it. They don't have the language to describe this. There's all these, what I call biomimetic or sort of natural derived patterns of motion. You have waterfalls, you have particle effects, you have the kind of lava lamp effects, you have, you know, all these dappled effects of the light on the lake in the setting sun, you have cherry blossoms falling. You think about nature, you think about the motion, the richness, the palette that we have to describe. There's not even a language of that yet. It's a world of exploration. And then, you know, this is an artist, Marco Brambilla. If you've ever been in New York City, the Standard Hotel on the High Line had an elevator, the lift, heaven to hell. You go up, you go to heaven, you go down, you go to hell, right? That was from 2008, I looked it up. But you know, what he does is he does these collage pieces of old Hollywood movies and all this weird stuff, but he puts such a density of content in there that it begs for a massive canvas. As the design team, what do you describe to say, I want something like this? What's the rate of motion here? What's the density of content? Because, you know, we're putting this on a 16-foot wide wall, and we want somebody every day to see something new. Like, I don't care if it's been 2 years of them looking at this wall, we want them to see something new every single time they look at it. So then, just a little bit to try to bring this back to reality, right? You know, whether you're doing a screening room, super yachts, break the proportion. Don't just put 16 by 9 in here. Our eyes have become so used to picking out 16:9 proportions on anything. The moment you see that in any scale, screen. It's all your mind thinks, right? So you break that. And right, again, you saw the tiles, skip through this. This was the way most of the systems are done. You're gonna see a lot more of these systems, I think, because the micro LED tiles now just beg for thinness in the way they're constructed. You can also see the heat load. It's just like, it's like an IR. It might as well be, put this in a sauna, you don't need a heater with it. Heat load drops, right? Even just a few years, wattage goes down. The key thing on these systems though is you still need a very solid substrate because you're putting these tiles together. If you noticed how sharp the corners are and how perfectly honed these edges are, think about it, you have 0.8 millimeters between pixels. So you have to put a physical gap between the edges and the pixels. So you have like 0.4 millimeters gap that you can play with. And as they get even tighter, 0.6, 0.5, that gap has to be even more perfect. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into making, for example, we have a magnetic mounting system. The tiles snap in, all the power and data is flowing through these magnetic mounts. But when we put these in, we align them, we calibrate them physically, and then we calibrate them digitally so that our software, again, Hollywood, they are fussy as hell. They want everything absolutely perfect. We can take the end row of pixels and the end row of pixels on the other one, and if you think about, there's a corner condition, so light refracts. It's a caustic lighting effect. So you might see one row of the RGB LEDs. Again, we're talking at like 1/10 of a millimeter is the total size, but you can see that effect. So we'll dim one or compensate the edge of the LEDs so that you don't see that edge, so that when the light blends through the corner of that epoxy resin edge, it's perfect. That's just the level of care and detail that goes into these screens. Really, really high quality to get these results. But what I'm more concerned about is just the basics. When you're sitting down there on trace and you're sketching with your clients, you know, do you have a sense of the scale of these things? Do they have a sense of the scale? You know, this is 16:9, 300. This is roughly an 8K screen. Just put the scale figure in there like you're used to. It shows it, but go vertical, go panoramic. You could put a 4K screen in right here. That's how much resolution and content is on that wall, and then still show some, you know, it's a Hamptons client. They love the America's Cup. You put visions of sailing ships and the horizon at the ocean all the other times of the day. Columns. I mean, even just going more corporate, imagine a conference room. Imagine, you know, normally you'd have the 100-inch TV there. You have some HDMI cable hanging out of it, right? Make the whole wall digital. What an experience you've just created for them. Again, just looking at, you know, what are the tiles. This is really difficult. A lot of people have a hard time. You have pixel pitch times resolution times physical size. So it's very hard to kind of understand how much resolution do I need? Like when you're trying to pick, do I need 1.2 or 0.8 or 0.6 or whatever? This chart here basically just looks at adding up the resolution across size, and again, relating to the human body, it's massive. A lot of interior designers, their world is finishes, right? And all this technology and all the pixel pitch is like, they're not gonna get their minds around it. But they sure as hell might get gloss versus matte as a material property. And it's not just because this is deeper blacks and this is better in ambient lighting. You might have very good other reasons why they want a glossy surface or a matte surface. If you're doing Hollywood Regency and everything is a silver and gold and chrome, and the art you want in there to be similar, like maybe that's the actual screen and you want it to show shiny art. You want a shiny finish. You're going to want that liquid black finish no matter what. Ambient light be damned. But if you're doing like Scandinavian modern, you have some really soft art, natural pieces, you're going to want matte. You know, humans are really, really good at sensing what the surface is with our eye. Is it shiny? Is it matte? So what this, to me, adds up to, you know, I don't like Le Corbusier. I was always a Mies guy because Mies was trying to do purity of form and surface, but he was trying to keep the materials as the essence of the architecture, right? He had the travertine marble, he had the beautiful rosewood panels, he had the polished brass and the matte brass and all of that. He wasn't stripping that away. And to me, if Mies was alive today, he would be playing with this as the exotic new luxury material and exploring how that would evolve over time. Any questions or talks? Because the reason I say that is I have a bonus section here. If you're still with me, I just put this in there. A lot of people come to these digital experiences through interactivity. Over 2 decades now, you've seen low resolution LED lighting and big screens. There's always some artist doing an installation where there's some camera tracking them, and like, you know, it's me and my shadow, I call it. What does it do? Oh, the wall's interactive. Yeah, you walk around and it follows your shadow. Yay. What point is that for? There's no reason to do that. It's a one-trick pony. It's because the technology can. There's no why behind it, right? So that's why I don't put this into the normal 4 that I talk about. I think these are more exciting and more practical for a lot of, particularly interior residential. But I'll bring this up that there are interactive elements. There's ambient communications are 2 very, very interesting areas. But it's like you can't do these until you kind of master these. This is what we give clients. We give them preset scenes, dimmable downlights, maybe some shades. At best, you get daytime or nighttime. So to go from this to spatial interactivity is too big of a leap. Also, the control systems need to fundamentally change. And this is a bit into the future, right? Everything I said up until now, I know you can easily pull off. You can write a spec, you can get it on a job. You're starting to see more and more systems now that you are not recording a scene. Here, this dimmer is on 10% and 100%, recording that. No, you have data input, you have processing, you have output. So data input, you're going to define cloud data. Is that the stock market? Is that the stock price of your billionaire's company? Is that the weather? Local sensing, is it just a switch, push button, or is it a stereo camera vision system that knows where everyone is in the room? Or is it data tables such as astronomical clocks, seasons, events? You're going to set up logic. If this, then that. If winter, if Christmas, if birthday, show this, right? Then you might have some pre-canned media content and you have the abstraction, right? Or the rendering engine. And then that's basically everything is a pixel. It's pixel mapped. Whether it's lights, whether it's 8K, everything is just treated as a sort of video pixel in these modern projects. And that saves you a lot of headache. You can see how different this is, but you know, Kevin has a system coming in called Scandal Poet that he's going to test on this that only takes data in and processes it and live puts it off. There are no preset scenes in the system. That concept is not fundamentally there. It is always rendering. That's the control. So once you get that system, once you get that, it's not like queuing up scene 3, but it's always generating stuff. That's when you can do interactivity. That's when you can do ambient communications. You know, me and my shadow, this is where designers really have to think. You can do touch, use simple proximity in a room, occupancy, or proximity to an object or a wall, occupancy. Like I said, spatial tracking, you can do precise, you know, everyone is in the room, you can track them, you can tag in with identity. It's up to you to then figure out the next step. Why? Why should the architecture respond to these things? Is it the billionaire wants to understand intuitively what his stock is doing that day? Is it the weather report? Why? Why do you want to see this? And then there's this last thing called ambient communications. I think it's easiest just to show you 3 of these ideas I had a while ago. Let's say it's a corporate lobby, and let's say you're trying to raise awareness for breast cancer. The more likes that's recorded on Instagram or whatever social media, this wall proportionally fills up. You can see why I show this as this is not your preset scene system, right? This is taking a data rate and converting it to some architectural scale. Hot or not. So let's say this is in a retail store and they take the rate of online shopping and that drives the rate of the lighting effect next to the mannequin in the store. So at any one time that store manager can look and say, oh, that is really hot online right now. Why you would need that, I don't know. Maybe it's cool, maybe it's not, but it's just like a relationship. Sparkling service, let's say you have a wall of sort of LED pixels and they sparkle, and that's tied to the weekly average online reviews for the service. So someday a manager comes in and he's like, why is our wall not sparkling? He looks it up and says, oh, we had a really bad week for service. We had a lot of negative reviews, right? Or the opposite, wow, we had a fantastic week, team, look at our wall, it's sparkling. You see why I put this in as the bonus content at the end? Because you think about how do I even think of these ideas, pitch them to my clients, document them, right? This is social media data. It could be weather, it could be any data stream you want. You have accumulation of likes drives a color of a wall. You have the action rate of shopping drives the variation of the lighting effect. You have the social proof, the average likes over time drives a pattern of light. Gets into a wild, wild world when you go down that route. That's all I got. So 120 slides, I think.